That was fun.
The prognosis for best-selling author and filmmaker Clive Barker.
I said, what did you think? And they said, well, if we'd known the word analysis, we would have tried to have put you in it.
Given his penchant for horror and his appetite for the macabre, you'd expect British-born writer Clive Barker to be, well, different. But preconceptions can be deceiving. Even though his novels have thrilled an ever-growing cult of horror fans, Clive Barker seems more like the boy next door. Nevertheless, his dark and unique imagination has served to bring forth not only modern tales of horror, but also best-selling epic fantasies, such as Weave World and Imagica. Plus, he's been able to turn his stories into the low-budget audience pleasers Nightbreed and Hellraiser, which he also directed. But novels are still his mainstay. His latest, The Thief of Always, is a departure for Barker. The story combines fantasy and fable and is geared toward adults and children. So when we visited Barker at his home in Beverly Hills, we couldn't help but ask about his own childhood.
Now, your parents, by all accounts, seem like perfectly normal folks.
Yeah.
They were, they had essentially office jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And you've said many times before that your childhood wasn't, by any measure, a normal childhood.
Sure.
But looking back now, if we asked your parents today to look back on Clive Barker as a kid, would they say, yeah, he was a normal kid? Or would
No.
they say he had his bouts of weirdness?
No, I actually asked them that question in this house about 3-4 months ago when they were here. I said, what did you think? And they said, well, if we'd known the word analysis, we would have tried to have put you in it. So,
and why is that?
because I was a weird little kid. I mean, you know, given a crayon and a piece of paper, I would not draw anything faintly resembling the environment around me. I would not draw a train or a house, or I would draw stuff which came like a larval flow out of my imagination. And
Monsters, beasts?
monsters, beasts, demons, decapitations. I mean, I don't think I'm the only child who did this, you understand. I mean, I think that when I think back to, you know, many of my peers, my other little kids, I think all of us had morbid streak in us. I think kids are very curious about things that adults draw a veil over. Mm-hmm. You know, violence, death, sex, the things which make which are made mysterious, made maybe more mysterious than they need to be, because parents say, oh, no, you mustn't see that, you mustn't look at that.
Yeah. Were you an only child?
No, I have a younger brother who is in every regard unlike me. We're loving siblings, but we have virtually nothing in common. I mean, he's a very pragmatic man, and
not a writer.
Not a writer. He was trained as a marine engineer, and now works with video games. Very successful. Has 2 wonderful kids. A wonderful dog. I have the dog in common with him, I guess. I also have a wonderful dog.
And he's still in England?
He's still in England. He's still in Liverpool, in fact. Some 5 miles from where we grew up.
Yeah. So what do your parents and your brother make of your work today? Are they fans? Or do they say, Clive, geez, I can't look at some of that stuff?
Oh, the latter. I mean, I took my mom and dad to see the cast and crew showing of Hellraiser. It's the first movie I'd ever made. And my name appeared on the screen, and my mom burst into tears. She was so wonderful. Finally, you know, Clive gets his name on the big screen. And I leaned over to her and I said, that's going to be the most fun you're going to be having for the next 90 minutes.
So tell us, what is the strangest thing about you, then? I mean, you make this case that you're just a normal guy, but if we were to look around your home or investigate your life, what would...
I think the single strangest thing is that this comes completely naturally to me. That is to say, the people regularly say, "What kind of drugs do you do to write these kind of books?" And I say, I don't do drugs. I'm fervently anti-drugs. And I quote Salvador Dali. There's a wonderful line from Salvador Dali. He was once asked, when he said to him, "Mr. Dali, what kind of drugs do you do to paint your pictures?" He said, "I am a drug. Take me." and it's something I do at 8:30 on a Monday morning with the same with the same enthusiasm that I do at 10:30 on a Friday night, sober. It's something I can't help doing. If the audience for dark fantasy and horror and science fiction was to disappear tomorrow, and somebody was to say, well, the only way you can keep your house in Beverly Hills is by writing cowboy novels and making Home Alone 3, then I'd be out of this place. It's what I do. It's the only thing I can do.
When Extreme Close-Up returns, Clive Barker on cemeteries and autopsies.
In this little piece of flesh are encoded 84 years of experience.
Welcome back to Extreme Close-Up, E's half-hour interview show with Clive Barker.
Among the, some might say, odder pastimes that you've engaged in, either for pleasure or for research, that I've read about, you've watched an autopsy being conducted, and you've strolled through cemeteries.
Yes.
Now, what have you learned from these
Well, I don't
activities?
think it ever hurts to think about death once in a while. I think it focuses you on life, for one thing. I mean, we are a culture almost neurotically preoccupied with not talking about larger issues. One of the ways to silence a dinner party is to talk about God or death, right?
Or autopsies.
Well, or autopsies. Well, that may join the two subjects very neatly right there.
But in addition to the philosophical lessons that we learned from autopsies and walking through cemeteries, what are some of the more pragmatic things that we find?
Well, don't get buried is a good pragmatic one, isn't it? Because people don't look after cemeteries very well. I mean, that's a simple fact right there. I think on the autopsy issue, if you like, a sense of wonder emerges from any close study of the human body. Even the grossly fat human body or the extraordinarily thin. We are this miracle. We are this walking miracle, beautifully packaged. I mean, we are really beautifully packaged. There's so much going on in us. The systems, by and large, work.
I think it's so interesting that you found poetry in autopsies and graveyards. I was expecting you to talk about what the brains look like and what the heart looks like, but no, you had a...
Well, let me give you an example of something which is extraordinary. You hold a brain in your hands, okay?
Which you've done.
Which I've done, and that is an extraordinary experience. The guy who had this brain yesterday, it was 84 years old, in this little piece of flesh are encoded 84 years of experience. I mean, that is miraculous, isn't it? That is wonderful. Now, if you can just get past the response, if you can just get past the that's disgusting response and look at the miracle of that, it's something we're walking around with right now. It's something we're using right now.
Now, you and Stephen King have a mutual admiration society. I would love to be a spider on the wall, if you will, when the two of you get together.
Talk about agents and deals and editors.
Is that true?
No. We have a relationship which occurs based upon, casual meetings at a party or, at a signing or whatever. I read everything he writes because he seems to me to be the cornerstone talent. I don't believe it would be possible for me to reach the number of readers that I do were it not for Steve's presence in the marketplace. I think he sort of freed up people to to read this kind of fiction without hiding it behind a copy of John Updike, you know?
Next on Extreme Close-Up, Clive Barker, the Boy Scout.
At 11 o'clock at night, when the fires had burned low, that was the thing.
To it. Welcome back to Extreme Close-Up, E's half-hour interview show with Clive Barker.
Clive, you've been very gracious to invite us inside your house
Very
here
welcome.
in Beverly Hills. And,
I like Beverly Hell, actually.
a Freudian slip, perhaps. And other than the fact that the door squeaked a little as it opened, the front door squeaked, it's not nearly as menacing an abode as we had imagined it might be.
Well, I think I was writing Thief of Always as we were working on this place. And I think houses were very much on my mind. They were not just as magical places, but also as places with some demoniacal life of their own, you know.
One of the themes that comes through the book for me is about the slipping away of time, how quickly time passes.
Yeah.
And we have to notice that despite your boyish good looks,
I'm 40.
You've turned 40 recently. Was that on your mind as you were?
I think it was absolutely on my mind, and I think sometimes pop psychology is exactly on the money, and you are. I think I was absolutely looking at who I was, who I am, and the boy I was. I found school tiresome and repetitive and stultifying. And that didn't change, actually, all the way through my university education. I felt completely liberated when education was over. I felt like it had just been sitting on my imagination. And I think I was trying to find ways to express myself. I mean, I think every kid's trying to do that, but maybe my imagination was a little bit more fevered, a little bit more vivid, and I wasn't finding ways to let it out. That's not quite true. I, as a Boy Scout, the only good thing that I could do was tell stories, you know. At 11 o'clock at night, when the fires had burned low, that was the thing that you took, you know. That was the moment at which you took Clive Barker out of the tent and said, okay, do your stuff, kid. And I could tell tales. But other than that, that was about the only way that I was really letting this stuff out.
Didn't your English teachers sense any potential?
Oh, yeah, I had a wonderful English teacher, and I think actually looking back, he was a major influence upon my doing what I'm doing. In fact, his name's Norman Russell, and I thank him in the introduction to my first book, because I think without Norman, I wouldn't have been encouraged in quite the way that I was. It's nevertheless the case that the requirements of education, that is, that you do the test, that you be ready for the examinations when they come along, tend to be about the learning of facts. You learn where to put the semicolon and what a gerund is. You don't necessarily learn what the semicolon and the gerund and the business of literature is actually for, which is expressing ideas and communicating things which are profoundly part of your nature to other people. Norman gave me a sense of that, but just a clue, and it wasn't until I was liberated from education that I got to do it myself.
Have you been in communication with him in your adulthood?
Yeah. English TV did a program about me a few years ago, and I actually went back to my old school. He is now long retired, but he came out of retirement to do an interview, and that was actually marvelous.
Yeah.
It was a great chance to thank him as an adult for the influence that he'd exercised.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, and I think, by the way, a lot of writers have such English teachers.
Boy, and nothing pleases an English teacher more than to have a star pupil achieve the kind of success that
I
that
guess,
you've had.
though, I think Norman would have preferred it if I'd been writing slightly less vivid pieces, shall we say.
Macabre, ghoulish,
exactly.
gory.
I think he would have liked me to have turned to, I suppose, a more legitimate form of writing in his estimation.
Now we've got to call attention to this character over my shoulder here.
Who's he? Yes.
Well, he started out being called the lead Cenobite in Hellraiser and evolved into this
monster.
enduring, this enduring figure.
Yeah.
We refer, of course, to Pinhead. What I think is interesting is the character is played by Doug Bradley,
Right.
who is like a lifelong friend of yours.
I was at school with Doug. We were speaking of Quarry Bank earlier. We're both at Quarry Bank. I met Doug when he was 14 and I was, I guess, 17. And we did a lot of the school plays together. You know, we did that whole thing of, what did we do? I guess the government inspector and a bunch of other fusty masterpieces, And we became great friends. I was the best man at his wedding. I've known him now 23 years, I suppose.
Of course, you had no idea as kids, right, that you would grow up to become this best-selling author and he would become this icon of
No,
horror.
and it's wonderful, because we presented a bust of Pinhead to Planet Hollywood for their collection in New York, and
the restaurant.
the restaurant, right? And I guess Doug was there in full makeup, full regalia, the whole deal. He looked spectacular, and he has a great authority as a man. He has a sort of great dignity as a man, and a wonderfully round sort of Shakespearean voice, and a lot of authority. But when he's in that get-up, he's irresistible,
Now, with your own theater background as a playwright and a director and an actor, do you have any film acting ambitions yourself?
I had two lines in Sleepwalkers.
That's right.
That will probably be the limit. No, I don't. I enjoy watching actors work immensely, and I think it's. I resent so much the fact that producers always think that they can write. This whole thing about, I write letters to my mom all the time. Of course I can rewrite your screenplay, I am absolutely not going to be in the position of saying, well, just because I can say words, that means I can say them on screen. It's a whole other thing. It's a craft. And people spend many years learning it. I am delighted to go and have the 2 lines or a little scene with Steve King and Sleepwalkers. It's wonderful, but that's not quite the same as carrying a movie,
Next on Extreme Close-Up, Clive Barker looks back in horror.
And I was in a very strange place.
This weekend on E!
Welcome back to Extreme Close-Up, E's half-hour interview show with Clive Barker.
Okay, Clive, for our last question for you, we'd like you to reflect back over your life. And starting at the age of 10, which is the age that your protagonist is in The Thief of Always, Harvey Swick, and give us a snapshot of what your life was like at the age of 10, 20, etc. So we're going to start with the age of 10. I think we have to take a look at what we look like, at what you look like. Here's the author at age 10.
Author photograph taken by his father. I think that little kid, despite the smile on his face, was actually pretty irritated with his life. I knew that there were all these veils to be drawn aside. We spoke of this earlier, the mysteries that were drawn over what adulthood was. I think lots of children feel that. I also felt, even then, I know this very strongly, that some things had been taken from me, which were given to me earlier in my life, which I valued, and I didn't know yet how to get them back. By which I mean, when you're 3, 4, 5, you're given wonderful stories, which you're sort of presented with as half-truths. Fairies, elves, poltergeists, imps, Santa Claus, the door at the back of the wardrobe which leads onto Narnia, the windows which will one day blow open and Peter Pan will be on the sill. And at the age of 10, I was between having had the miracles taken away and being self-willed enough to go and find them for myself.
So at 20, had you had your sights set on a writing career?
I had been writing theater pieces and producing them, and had actually had some little measure of local success in that area. I'd done some acting. Doug Bradley, Pinhead, had been in a number of those plays. So I mean, I had that satisfaction, but they were all extracurricular, you know. Certainly my attention had not been turned to the idea of doing short stories. I was doing a lot of illustration, doing a lot of stuff for my own pleasure.
So let's jump to Clive Barker at 30.
Clive Barker at 30 is beginning to sense who he is. I was still working in what in England we call fringe theatre, off Broadway, small productions, very often with too few funds and too large an ambition.
And at 50, where do you see yourself at 50?
More of the same. I think when we express ourselves imaginatively, we can reach beyond ourselves. And the physical limitations, we've talked a lot about the physical limitations of the body, and you're certainly more aware of that at the age of 40 than you are at 30. And that's the most exciting thing that happens in my life, is when I'm in the middle of writing a scene, and I suddenly realize that I'm in a territory that nobody's been before. It's the frontier spirit. Here I am in an unknown land. And my duty is to come back to town, come back to my readers and say, you know, what I saw out there was wonderful, just wonderful. Come and follow me.
Clive, we've taken you away from your work, from the creative process, and we appreciate the time. You're not such a weird guy after all.
Thank you.
And it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
For me too, thank you.
What we got here?
Is a picture of me at the age of 1.
Oh my God.
With my little
That's where it all
dog,
began.
Chemist. That's right. In Ottenay Lane.